Hello everyone, welcome back. Now we're going to talk about how to vary the shading between each of the bricks. And you can see here the color is shifting. And I'm going to go to the shader and it's called bricks front. And what I'm doing here is I've created an ID attribute called object, and this is a primitive attribute. So let me show it here. So for example, on the glass geometry, when I prepped the geometry using a connectivity node, or when we did the separation, I made an object value that is unique per each piece. So if I look at that, you will see that the object value is an integer, a unique integer between each one of them. So we need to store that attribute in the geometry, and there's only few pieces that need this. Basically the tile, we don't need it for the glass for sure, but I had it on everything. And an easy way to do this is using a for each loop. If you have already prepped the geometry and you wanted to do it as an overlay, you can do it using a for each loop and loop over each primitive, and then create an ID attribute or an attribute, and that ID attribute should refer to the iteration number. So in the for each loop, for each named primitive, and this is going to use the name, and we'll create metadata, and this is going to have an iteration attribute, a detail attribute called iteration, and you just link that in the attribute wrangle to look up the value of that, of what iteration you're at, and generate the ID from there. So that's pretty much it. And then once I have that available, I can use it to generate random attributes. So let's go back. I want to lower the render settings and disable GI, and let's connect the front, this one here. Okay, so it's using I'm using the shader for the inside bricks, which is this one. And let's take a look. Let's just verify. So yeah, that's the shader. Those are the bricks. And the ID attribute right now, if we connect this, we're not going to be able to see this. But if I do a random, if I use this user data, so I'm reading the primitive attribute and I use that to generate a random function, a random attribute, I should get variation between the bricks. You can see that. So each brick has a different color. Now Arnold has a color jitter node, and it's a pretty smart node. So you can figure out the object. If you have primitives, it will figure that out. If you have faces, it will use the faces. If you have instancing, it will use instancing. So it's pretty smart node. But we can also feed it our own data, and that's what I did. So here I'm simply passing the object attribute, which is the primitive attribute, and I'm using that to shift the to change the gain, basically darken some of them, shift the hue, so these are the min and max, and then saturation, and you can change that like that, and see how that reflects to the shader. And then that gets passed into the diffuse component. So this goes into the diffuse component, and that's what gets used in the final shader. Here I have a color correct node to increase the colors of or the brightness of the colors, and let's reduce this back like that, and maybe increase this to 5 so we can clearly see the bricks. And that's pretty much it for the shading. This you can ignore. I'm doing a round shader, but It's nothing major. It's simply I'm trying to round the corners of the object, but I wouldn't recommend doing it. It's very small and it's not visible, so nothing crazy there. And I wanted to show two renders, so I did this version, which we did together, and then I turned on motion blur, and this is the result with motion blur on. So that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.